Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Welcome, I'm Rachel. I am the dietitian at Johnson Memorial. And so before I start going into anything, I'll kind of describe what I made because I think it's a good recipe for easy and good for people that are busy and working. So if any of you are familiar with the Power Bowls that they have at Taco Bell, I did kind of like a copycat recipe of that. And so I used chicken, and then I tried to find as many like convenience items that were also healthy, like low sodium, because that's a big one. So I bought frozen avocados, frozen diced avocados, and that's what the guacamole is from. And then I used, which I would show you the bag for those, but I threw it out. And then I used brown rice, so you just boil in a bag. I think it took about 10 minutes per bag, which with this many people took a minute, but with just yourself, your family, doesn't really take too long. So that's what I did with the rice, and then just a bag of cheese, sour cream. I did use low fat. I don't know if anybody noticed. And then just some black beans, and the toppings you can, kind of do whatever you like to do, but it's a very good combination of, we have some good complex carbs with the brown rice, so going to be giving us a really long, sustained energy with that, and then some good healthy fats with like the guacamole / avocado, and then obviously some good protein with the chicken, and then some from the cheese as well. So very good for just kind of a one and done type meal. And I did that intentionally because with meal prep and trying to, eat healthfully when you are somebody who's so busy, the more like one and done things that you can do are, the most ideal. So I'll go ahead and get into this information. So initially, just kind of talking about some basics, some ways or kind of what to look for to make some healthy choices whether it's at work or bringing something to work, and then just some tips and recommendations. So I do talk about meal prep mostly, but then also some options for if we're going out to eat, because let's face it does happen, and that's not the end of the world, but we would just want to make best choice that we can. Spending as much time at work as we do, if you think about that over years, that's a lot of eating being done at work. So it really adds up as far as if we're making good choices versus not making good choices. And so that's why, kind of going into, this is just kind of some information on the nutrients themselves. So the carbohydrates being the first one. And this is mostly kind of just for reference, but basically, so the complex carbohydrates there, that brown rice would be an example of that. So those are what we want to look for as a big foundational piece for our meals, because that's what's going to give us that sustained energy, as opposed to, you see those simple carbohydrates being the opposite of that. So those are the things that the body doesn't have to do a lot of work to break those down. The easiest examples would be like soda or candy, things like that, where there's a very quick uprising in like the blood sugar and then dropping very quickly, which we would be more likely to see kind of a crash from those. So those are going to be the ones that don't provide that long sustained energy throughout the day. So again, brown rice being the example in today's. Now as far as protein, again, kind of just information on what makes protein what it is, what good choices are. But so basically we would just want to make sure that the protein option that we're choosing has mostly beneficial nutrients, because a lot of times your protein choices also have some fat, so like a lot of our meats. So we would just want any of our cuts of meat to be on the leaner side, or trimming away a lot of the fat. And then also, potentially with heart healthy fats, depending on, what we've chosen for the protein. So like nuts would be an example of that, having some good protein, but also some good heart healthy fats. And then we'd want to avoid, or like the non-beneficial ones, like things that are going to be, real high in the sodium, for a couple reasons. it is linked to higher blood pressure, but you also just feel kind of gross if you have something that super high in sodium retaining a little bit more water, just feeling a little bit bloated. So you don't really want to be feeling kind of that weighed down when you're out in the field working. So that would kind of be on the other end of the spectrum of the things that we would maybe not want to be with our protein choices. And then fats, so that would be where like the avocado / guacamole would come in. So these are also going to be very helpful for kind of rounding everything out, and again making sure that the carbohydrates are going to stay providing that energy. So if we just did the complex carbohydrate, it wouldn't be a crash, but you'll see a better, what's the word that I want? It will last longer and provide a more rounded out fuel, I guess, when we combine them all together, and fat being the last important piece of that. So one of the big things that they found with fat as a part of our diet is this is really what's leading to a lot of our cholesterol issues. So they used to think that it was more so just cholesterol in foods that was making our like bad cholesterol go up, making our total cholesterol go up. But they're really finding out now it has potentially more to do with the fats in the diet. So there's really just two types. There used to be three, but that one has since been banned in the United States. I don't know if any of you recognize the term trans fats. Those have been banned in the United States relatively recently because there was just nothing good about them. But of course we didn't know that when we created them. And so you'll still see that on a food label, but it'll pretty much always be 0. So that leaves the unsaturated there and then the saturated. So relatively easy to remember because they're kind of opposites in every way. So like the unsaturated, that's going to be the ones that are a little bit more heart healthy, going to be helpful for just lowering overall cholesterol. Some of them can lower the bad cholesterol, and some of them can be helpful for raising that good cholesterol. So we're trying to do a mix of different heart healthy fats, and we'll go into like sources of all these. And then saturated fats, so kind of on the other end of the spectrum of if we do too much, okay to have in limited amounts, but if we're doing too much, you'll see that that jump in total cholesterol, in LDL cholesterol, which is that bad cholesterol. So not something that we want if we're trying to live, a long, healthy, active life. So ideal choices for everything. So with carbohydrates, there's a good amount of options. So again, using brown rice as the example. So any whole grains. And what I tell people with looking at grains specifically, manufacturers can be very tricky with their advertising and their labeling on any of like your cereals, your breads, any like rice, pastas, things like that. So I just have people look directly at the back and check out how much fiber is in there. So if there's like 2 or more grams, then you're good to go. It's going to be providing you some good benefits. If there's like 0 to 1, that product is probably mostly going to be those refined grains or those more processed grains that are just opposite from the whole grain. So kind of missing out on some of the benefits when that happens. Fruits. So those are always going to be a good option. We do want to, though, if it's a fruit juice, even if it's juice that you've juiced at home on your own, totally not processed or anything, it's still something that we'd want to limit to no more than 4 ounces a day, just because you get so many more benefits out of the whole fruit itself. You're going to get a lot more fiber that way. When we juice it, we're removing pretty much all of the fiber. So okay to do, we would just want to limit it to about 4 ounces at the most. And then your beans, your starchy vegetables, I can't see the other one because of the glare. Dairy, also a good, which a lot of people don't realize, dairy is a really good option for, well, if you can tolerate dairy. Very good option for, it's a good mix of protein and carbohydrate. So especially, mostly your milk and your yogurt. Cheese will have a little bit more, more fat than anything else. But your yogurt and your milk, a very good combination. Same with the beans and like the starchier vegetables. So like your corn, your potatoes, your peas, those are going to have a good complex carbohydrates, but they're also going to have some protein as well. So those are also a good option for getting a couple different nutrients. And then any like mixed dishes, so like black beans and rice, different sandwich wraps, soups, stuff like that. And those are ones that I like recommend for if you are trying to like meal prep and things like that, because you can use up a lot of ingredients, and you can do a lot with different mixed dishes. As far as protein, so the proteins that are considered like they have the most bioavailability of us absorbing it, are going to be those ones at the top. However, the ones below that, still very good for us. So it's not that you would want to avoid those. You would just want to make sure that you're getting some from the top as well, just to get the greatest amount of protein absorbed. But I mean, pretty much anything here is good to go. We would just want to make sure that with like the beef or the pork or any of those, that it's like a leaner cut. So like typically the ones with like loin or round in the name are going to be your leaner options. And then fat. So we talked a little bit about this already, but the unsaturated ones, so those ones that you hear called like heart healthy, those are mostly plant-based products. And I don't say that to say that you need to be like a vegetarian or anything. That's just how they were made. And then the opposite, the saturated fat, being mostly in animal products, but you will notice that coconut and palm oil, which palm oil you might not be as familiar with, but coconut oil was a really big thing for a while. So I'd like to point out that again, any of those are okay to do, it's just we're trying to limit them. So about like 15 to 20 grams a day of saturated fat total is usually a good overall goal. And then this is kind of just showing like a quick snapshot of like where those would be on the label, what things that you would want to limit, what things that you would want to prioritize. Now the only thing that you won't typically see is you almost will never see that unsaturated fat on the label. They're not required to show you that, but you will always see saturated fat, and then the trans fat, like we said, should always be 0. But if you ever are wanting to know that how much unsaturated fat there is, you could just take the total minus the saturated, and the difference would be about how much unsaturated fat or heart healthy fat is in there. And then fiber, always going to be the first thing underneath the total carbohydrates. So that's what I have people look at, like when we were talking about grains and things, just double checking that, making sure there's a couple grams. And then they actually did start putting added sugars on the food label. So actually what happened was they came out with kind of a totally new revamped food label. I don't know if any of you would have noticed or not, I don't know. But I mean, if you don't work in nutrition, that would make sense. But they did start to include on this new label specifically added sugars. So I don't have people look at total sugars, I have them look at added sugars. So, and those being exactly what they sound like. So anything that either the manufacturer, or like if we were to add something like sugar in coffee, so just anything that's added. The negative thing about those is that they're typically not really coming with any benefits. So, you know, probably not coming with a lot of vitamins, minerals, fiber, things like that. So I have the recommendations there, but basically we want to limit it to about like 20 to 35 grams a day from that. So again, not something that you have to do 0 of, but similar to the saturated fat, we would want to limit it. And then hydration. So just making sure that we're staying hydrated throughout the day. This can really affect our hunger levels as well. So that's kind of why I pulled this piece in. Even though we don't really think about them being connected, our body just functions much better when it's well hydrated, especially if you're in a profession or a field of work where you know, maybe you're sweating more, maybe you're outside, maybe you're doing a lot more. Just extra important to be aware and make sure that we're being well hydrated. Now, as far as like how much hydration or fluid somebody needs, it's very individualized. But as far as like choices, basically just anything that doesn't have much things added to it, mostly the sugar, that's usually what you'll see added to things. So best bet, water, flavored water is fine. We would just want to make sure it's you know, low calorie, 0 sugar, ideally. And then again, it's individualized how much you need, but I typically tell people just check the color of your pee. That's the easiest way to know. So the lighter it is, the more well hydrated you are. And it can, a lot of times by the time that we get that signal from the body that, you know, we notice we're thirsty, at that point we're usually already a little bit dehydrated. So that's just kind of why it's important to stay on top of it, just because you know, you feel better, you have more energy, your body functions much better with, you know, staying properly hydrated. So getting into kind of like some tips for people who are super busy. So planning ahead, that is everything. You know, no matter if we're meal prepping, no matter if we're going out to eat, you know, planning ahead, you're gonna be just, I don't even know what the percentage would be, like 99% more likely to, you know, make healthier choices, you know, just be smart about what maybe things that you're adding to your food or places that you're going. So just planning ahead, even if it's just like, it could be the smallest thing. You know, it doesn't have to be, if you're not at the meal prep phase or that's not something you're interested in, even just planning, you know, what maybe a couple of your options are for the week that you might go out and get. That's still gonna get you to choose better things than if you just didn't do any planning at all and then went out to eat. So even if, again, you're not like meal prepping everything all day, every week, planning ahead is still gonna be super relevant. So one of the things I like to make sure people know is that we wanna eat breakfast. I know that that's, people might get tired of being told that, but it's such a benefit, and a lot of times I think every single person I've ever talked to who, you know, they don't eat breakfast and then they'll tell me about what they do the rest of the day. They end up overeating or binging around like dinner time or like after that. And it's because you haven't eaten anything all day. And again, especially if you're somebody who is, you know, you're in a very active field, that's gonna be something that you want to do. So now if you're somebody who does like second shift or third shift, it can be a good idea to have sort of like your main meal prior to going to work. And that might look different for different people, but that tends to, number one, you've already had, you know, something to eat. And so it's not like the minute you get to work, you know, you get pulled into something, you forget to eat. So just can be, again, and that just goes back to the planning ahead, you know, making sure that we're kind of doing something to take care of that, to kind of just to start our shift or our day off in the most helpful and the most beneficial, you know, way that we can. Snacks, I'm a big proponent of snacks. Now this, I mean, again, very individualized on your schedule, on you as a person, on, you know, your groceries, things like that. But snacks are great for just preventing overeating. So I think a lot of people correlate eating snacks with eating more, but really if you're having a snack every so often, a lot of times you end up eating less because then you're not starving later, you're not, you know, binging around dinner time or overeating, you know, as an after dinner snack. So just something that I always think is a good idea. And it's not, I mean, it could just be one snack in that, you know, if you know that, or if you're just somebody that's more likely to go long stretches without something, you know, if you're, again, out in the field or, you know, you get on a call and you know that you're somebody who will not have anything for however long, just having like 1 or 2 snacks on hand really ends up working well. And these are just like some ideas. So the big thing with this is kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, we're trying to do a mix of things. So trying to do, you know, a little bit of protein, a little bit of carbohydrate, maybe a little bit of fat as well. And lots of different options, you know, it's not that there's like one best type of snack or anything. And snacks are also a really easy, well, I shouldn't say really easy, but can be an easy way of getting in more fruits and veggies. Even, you know, as a dietitian, it's hard, I don't always get my veggies in. So, you know, if I have them as a snack with like peanut butter or something, that's just another way to get in, you know, meet my recommended amount of vegetables per day. Same with fruit, you know, some people do really well with vegetables and fruit. So, but just a way to get in, you know, more, all of our nutrients, all of our food groups, and things that are maybe, you know, kind of get pushed to the wayside. And then keeping items at work. So this kind of goes hand in hand with snacks. So how we were saying, you know, kind of have things on hand. That's kind of like the planning ahead for planning ahead, if that makes sense. So, you know, just having a couple things there so that when you do forget or you didn't have time to plan ahead, you've already planned ahead because you've kept some things on hand. And again, totally up to personal preference. These are just kind of some ideas, but ideally we kind of want some different options. So, some like whole grains, some complex carbohydrates, some protein, some fat. But the opposite of this is also true. So we would want to be mindful of not keeping certain things at work. And this might be harder if you're somewhere where there's like a cafeteria or a vending machine or something. You can't necessarily do anything about the options that are in that. But if there's things that you are easily tempted by, like chips and things like that, that you find yourself you'll just eat them sort of mindlessly, probably a better bet to not keep those at work or portion them out. So throw some in some Ziploc bags and leave the actual full bag at home, and then that way you can still have whatever snack it is that you really enjoy, but you're not going to overdo it because you've already portioned it out. So getting into the meal prep, there's no perfect way to meal prep. I think a lot of people get just stuck on feeling like they have to do a certain thing or they have to make things a certain way, but you really just do whatever works for you as a person, your family, your schedule, your job, your preferences, all of that. It really just comes down to what's going to work for you. So planning ahead, obviously very relevant with meal planning. So one thing, if you're somebody who maybe doesn't meal prep a lot or it just sounds too overwhelming, totally fine to just do a couple days a week, or even just start with one day a week and do a breakfast meal or do a lunch meal, whatever baby steps that are going to work for you. And maybe you don't need to meal prep for the whole week. Maybe it's just certain days or certain shifts. So just starting out with one meal or one snack, or just maybe even one day of a couple meals. Those are some resources that have good options for meal prep, and I have a couple more later on in this as well. But I mean, a lot of times these magazines and these subscriptions have very helpful options. I mean, granted, there's some that maybe have some not super helpful options, but you can also tailor things as well, kind of like what I did today. So this is just an example of like kind of what that could look like. I mean, it's very simple. You can see it's not super complicated. It's just what meals that you eat, or maybe even whatever meals are going to be most helpful for you to meal prep. I have some people who they do fine with breakfast, but then they maybe forget to eat lunch, but then they do fine with dinner. So maybe that's the meal that you meal prep. And this is just an example of like a grocery list, what categories things could be in. Because with meal prepping, you do want to make sure that you have the grocery list for that, and that you have somewhat like a tentative plan for what meals or snacks and things that you want to make. And then this is sort of, I thought this was kind of cool, kind of like a guide for, okay, do these couple things on this day. So you meal prep for a couple days, and then maybe you get into like Wednesday or Thursday and you do some of the really quick meals. You've already done a big chunk of it, and then now that you've kind of used all those meals up, you're more or less midway through the week, and now you just have these couple things that you have to do. And they're not as complicated as the ones initially in the beginning, but they'll still work as some meal prep options. Typically it works the best if you kind of find some day or some time to dedicate to the meal prep. And again, that looks different for different people, because some people work weekends, some people don't work weekends, some people work 24-hour shifts, some people don't. And it might even look like that previous example that we just saw, where you do a big chunk of it for most of the week, so you do that on Sunday, and then the rest of it you do maybe on like Wednesday or Thursday. You can just have a couple days left of the week. Now, as far as like keeping things food safe, that's what this kind of addresses. Now, you can batch cook and freeze a lot of things. I tend to use, although I mean there are containers, I just tend to use like the 1 gallon Ziploc bags for a lot of things, just to kind of keep them separated. That's what I'll do if I'm doing like grains and soups too. I just put them in like a Ziploc bag, and it label it and it works great. But yeah, so you would want to make sure though, definitely keeping food safety in mind. You don't want anybody to get any foodborne illnesses. And then different containers. So this shows a couple examples, but I had found like super cheap like meal prep containers off Amazon that were like, you got like a big stack of them, and they were pretty cheap. It was a while ago that I got them, but that's not to say that you can't invest in ones that are a little bit nicer. Glass ones are really nice. I was just too cheap at that time to get those, but I do have some now and they are a great option. And then also like doing different sizes of things, so like salad dressing ones, if you're somebody who knows you'll do a lot of that. Or those can also be good for like portioning out like nuts and things like that are pretty high calorie. And so we want to kind of keep those portions small. Little ones like that can be helpful. And then those ones specifically, those Freshworks that have like the aerated or like the filter or whatever, letting more air in, and like more regulating that and like moisture can be good for produce, because I know that can be a pain with trying to keep those fresh. And then keeping it as simple as you want to. So how many ingredients? I'm trying to think of, I guess I did use a decent amount of ingredients today just because we had different toppings. But you definitely can just choose toppings that you specifically like. So it could just be cheese, it could just be the avocado or the guacamole. So just things that have a couple ingredients are fine. I have an example, those examples at the bottom there are like pre-made like smoothie things. So I think smoothies are a great option for any like meal prep, but especially for breakfast. I have a lot of people who will tell me, they're not hungry in the morning. So typically if you do something that's more liquid based, so even if it was like a protein shake, or like a smoothie in this example, those are much less overwhelming than something that's like a solid piece of food. So I always have people try out some smoothies, but those are just some different mixes where it has some veggies in there, has some fruits in there. You could obviously use your own, make your own. And then these are, and I can send these out, but these are some really helpful resources that I had found that are like very minimal ingredients, and then also kind of some guidance for like batch cooking and freezing. And I'd be happy to send those out. But then also this one I think is like one of the most important ones. So trying to find those shortcuts that you can. So like with the rice that I had showed you, like it's like you just boil it in the bag, it was very quick. Things like that. You don't have to do that for every single thing, but I found that certain things are worth it to me. So like, because things can definitely, like pre-cut fruits or veggies, for example, like those can be more expensive, but I know myself, and I know that I'll be more likely to actually eat the veggies if they're pre-cooked, because otherwise I might buy them and not cut them up, and then they're not gonna get eaten. So, and that's just an example of what I know works for me. But just kind of keeping that in mind, maybe we don't do a shortcut for everything because we don't want to blow a ton of money. But with certain things, I think it's definitely worth it. And then if you think about how much money you do save making your own food and doing the meal prep as opposed to maybe going out, even if you splurge a little bit in this area, you're probably still saving money. So these are just, again, kind of some examples. And then investing in some good kitchen equipment if you don't already have some. So slow cookers and like the Instapot are great options, because those you can kind of just turn them on, let them do their thing, and then you come back and it's done. So I think those are always a good option. I also think I don't know what you would call it, just an egg cooker, I guess. But you can just throw like, they have different sizes, but you could throw like 6 eggs, 10 eggs in there, it hard boils them. You have those for the week. Those are one of my favorites. But I guess that would depend if you like hard boiled eggs or not. And then like more like large stock pots, things like that, if you are wanting to like batch cook things. Definitely worth it. And the ones that are a little bit more high quality last longer. So a good investment depending on what types of things you want to make. And then these are like other helpful tools. So like this one specifically, someone had actually given that to me as a gift, and it's awesome. I don't think it's that specific brand, but it's just something like that, like slices up. There's a bunch of different like parts to it. I know you probably can't see them very well, but it can like grate, it can like slice up vegetables and fruits, and that's like a pretty big one. Mine's not that big, but just helpful for, you know, those things that are a pain if you're like doing it by hand. And this is something that I think is helpful, just because I like to have kind of a foundation of, you know, what I'm going to be doing with meal prep. So this is just kind of an outline or a layout of, you know, what you would want to make sure that you're involving. So, you know, we want some of that lean protein, we want, you know, our veggies or fruits, and then we want some whole grains just for that complex carbohydrate piece, and then some healthy fat as well. So, and that can look different. You know, maybe one of the things is like how we were saying the fruit or veggies can make a great snack. Maybe that's in that component, and then the rest of this is like in a meal together, like the bowl that we did today. And then these are just more examples of like different recipes and things, or quick things that you can put together. So there's a slow cooker option, and there are some vegetarian options. But you can see like a lot of these only have like 2, 3, 4 ingredients. And this one being the slow cooker one is again something that you just throw it in there and it is taken care of. And then marinades. So I do like having different recipes for marinades just because you can get tired of things that you're doing. And so an easy and like a pretty quick way to kind of switch that up would be to just find a couple different like marinades or like sauces that you like and that are, you know, again, only a couple ingredients. And then you can make similar things with much different flavors. So you don't, you know, if you're somebody that gets tired of eating similar things or eating the same thing all the time. And then some examples for like the whole grains or like the healthy carbohydrates, and some seasonings. And then going out to eat. So this is just kind of some information for just making better choices while you can. So one of the main things, this is probably, in my opinion, like the most important. If you can, looking up that nutrition information of wherever you're going beforehand. And you can't do that for every single place. You know, those little like mom and pop type places don't always have that information. But most places do. And then if we're doing that, just picking out a couple choices that are, you know, a little bit more helpful, you know, maybe lower sodium, maybe, you know, high in protein, relatively low in like the saturated fat, you know, those things that were highlighted on that food label piece. And then that way you have a couple options in mind when you get there and you're not, you know, caught off guard, or, you know, you get to talking and put in your order really quick because the waiter has come around like 5 times and you feel like you have to order. So just something that, again, goes back to that planning ahead. And then one thing too, little things here and there really do make a difference. And that may or may not sound cliche, but you know, say McDonald's, you know, say you're somebody who like, that's your go-to, that's your favorite, you have a really hard time not going there. Just find something that's maybe a little bit of a better choice than what you were doing. So that could be like a kid's meal, as say you normally get a Big Mac, or you normally get like an adult size meal. Doing maybe a kid's meal and, you know, getting a water, just those little things is really gonna cut down on the fat, the sodium, the total calories. But it's still giving you a little bit of, you know, of what you want. If you're not, you know, somebody who is, you're not ready to eliminate it, or you don't want to eliminate it. And there's really nothing I tell people you can't ever eat. But obviously, you know, with restaurants like that, we do want to kind of keep it to moderation. So if you're kind of trying to work that down, this is always a good way to do it. And then veggies on the side, or like doing a water if you're somebody that does a lot of soda, doing a water, or doing like a kid size soda or something if you're like out at a restaurant, and then getting like a bigger size glass of water. All those little things, they really do add up. And then you feel better too. You know, you feel more, I guess, successful with, you know, making some good choices, and that makes it easier to continue to make good choices. Now these are just some things that you would want to look for. So the two categories of like things that are probably not going to be the best option versus things that are going to be a little bit better of an option. And that's more so coming down to like how it's cooked or like how things are added. So you can see things that are like breaded, cheesy, you know, all of those things are going to be much higher in fat, much higher in calories, probably a lot higher in sodium because sauces and things tend to have a lot of sodium. So, I mean, even if you don't feel like you didn't look at the restaurant information or nutrition information beforehand, if you get to the restaurant and just look for these words, you can still pretty well guarantee that you can make a better choice with those. And then these are things that I actually do, so I do think they're helpful, especially the last one. So getting either like a vegetable or a side salad or water, something where it's going to take up some room in your stomach, no matter how little, and going to make you that much less likely to overeat, because we know restaurants typically have three sizes too big of like portions and things like that for one person. And then that like tricking your brain. So this could be, you know, going out to eat or even at home. So one thing that I think works really well is like cheese. I always use the example of cheese with this. So love cheese, but easy to overdo it. So if you cut it up into like, if you see like cube cheese, for example, but then cut that into multiple little pieces, it feels like you're eating that much more because you've put it to your mouth that many more times. And so a very good way of kind of tricking your brain into thinking that you ate a lot more than you actually did. So which is helpful for keeping us, you know, for somebody that does have trouble with portions, finding different ways to trick your brain is sometimes the strategy that we have to go to. And then eating slowly. So I think this is something that we probably do hear a lot, you know, eating slowly, eating more mindfully, but it does help and it does work. Because a lot of times if we're somebody that eats fast, and I say this as somebody who does tend to eat fast, if we're eating too fast, that is going to not allow for the brain to signal to us that we're full as well as it would if we were eating slowly. So it just allows for that communication to take place, allows for, you know, us to actually notice and listen that we are getting full. So something that tends to work really well is just setting your utensil down in between bites. That literally physically forces you to, you know, eat a little bit slower because you're having to put it down and pick it up in between each bite. And then sharing with other people, or, you know, having a to-go box brought to you right when you order your meal, something where the portion is smaller than what it was originally. That's always going to cut down on everything, you know, cut down on calories, the fat, the sodium, all of that. Any questions on any of that? Or comments or complaints? Did the food taste similar to what you thought it would when I told you what it was? More or less.